Hey everyone, welcome back. David in History for the Ages here. So here we go. I've had students telling me this so many times. I didn't know Jewish people lived in Israel until 1948. They thought until 1948 there was no Jewish population there. And the level of historical illiteracy for people to actually believe that is stunning. Not only have Jewish people been there before 1948 in Israel, Jewish people have continuously lived in Israel for over 3,000 years through every empire, through every attempted exile, through every conquest of the land. Jewish people have still lived there with their same culture and identity and values for thousands of years. And, as you watch this video, I am going to go through, I'm going to show you the data, I'm going to show you the numbers, and I'm going to trace this 3,000 years history here. And I'd love to know your thoughts on this. Did you know this? And also, which of these civilizations that did come in and try to displace the Jewish people had the biggest impact? And, why is it? Another idea I'd love to hear from you is why is it you think the Jewish people have managed to maintain this connection to this land in such a powerful way? Is it the religion? Is it geography? Is it the culture? What is it? And I'd love to hear your thoughts on that as well. So let's just get right to this data, right? And so what you could see here is this is information that I have compiled over 30 years of teaching history, right? Reading various sources, primary sources, secondary sources. In the description of this video, I listed just a handful of the documents that we would use to get these numbers. And of course, as you go do a lot of the ancient material, a lot of the data is going to be not exact. And you can see here, I have very wide ranges for a lot of the estimated values. And I did that on purpose when I put this thing together because I'm trying to present an honest narrative. Do we know exactly how many Jewish people lived there in this entire span of 3,000 years? No, but as you look through it, there is always a Jewish presence there, right? And so I'm going to kind of go through not quite every one of these time periods, but I'm going to go through most of them so you can kind of understand what I'm talking about as we're going through this. And you should be able to see this pretty clearly on a computer, on a phone even, I think it's okay, but definitely on a computer you'll see it really well. All right, and so we'll start from the beginning, the ancient roots, right? And so, the kingdom of David and Solomon, one thing I get a lot is, oh, is that real? Is that from the Bible? Do we even can we use anything other than biblical history? Yes, I actually have a short video. This is the thumbnail from it. About proof of King of David, and it talks about the Tel Dan stele, and yes, there's definitely evidence that the Jewish people inhabited this land going back to 1000 BC, if not earlier. Now, what is fairly disputed is what is the population, because when you do the archaeology, was the kingdom of David and Solomon a glorious big kingdom, or was it more a smaller, isolated civilization? And there is dispute on that, and there's, I think, fair dispute on that. But what there is zero dispute on is that the Jewish people have been living there during that time period. So that was kind of the initial stages, right? Then we move on to what happens after the period of Solomon. Very basic history here, and I do have a huge playlist that goes into so much more detail on all of this. I have that small little video on Tel Dan, and I have these longer videos that goes through the whole political history, my whole history of Israel playlist. But what you see here is after Solomon, the kingdom divides. You have the kingdom of Israel in the north and the kingdom of Judah in the south. And what happens around the 700s BC time period, the kingdom of Israel is going to eventually be conquered by the ancient Assyrians, and many of the Jewish people would have fled. Now, by now, you can see the population is probably about 600,000 roughly. So the Assyrians come in, they disperse many of the Jewish people, and then in the south, the kingdom of Judah, that's conquered by the Babylonians. And the Babylonians are the ones that destroy Solomon's temple, of course, if you're familiar with that story, and that's in like the 500s BC period. And then, of course, as a result of that, there's a dramatic drop in Jewish population in that region, maybe as low as 50,000, but there was still a Jewish presence there. Then after the period of the Assyrians and the Babylonians, you get the Persians and Cyrus, who allows the Jewish people to come back, and you have the building of the second temple of the ancient Hebrews, and you start to see the Jewish population rise again, as you could see in the numbers here. Then we have this whole period of time, because I just don't want to go through every single thing here. It'll take a very long video here, but this kind of Hellenistic to the rise of Rome. And during that era, you do begin to see even a growing population again. It gets as high as probably 1 million people who are living in Israel that are Jewish people. This is an image here, by the way, of Masada. I have another great video on that if you haven't seen that before. And I'm going to leave some of these video links in the description as well. All these videos I'm mentioning that I have topics on that I really hope you go and watch. But yes, so they rise in great numbers, and then the Romans come in. And then you get to this, I think, really pivotal moment in what happens to the Jewish population in Israel. Because during the Roman era, you have, these emperors that come in and greatly persecute the Jews. You have Titus. This is an image of the Arch of Titus. He's, of course, the guy responsible for destroying the second temple of the ancient Hebrews. And then after that, you have Hadrian, and Hadrian, of course, is the guy who really, for lack of a better word, commits the genocide of the Jewish people in Israel. We know he massacres, according to our Roman sources, about 500,000 Jewish people. We have like a Roman historian, Cassius Dio, and we have other sources as well that talk about when he comes in, he outlaws circumcision, he renames the land. It was Hadrian who took this land of Israel and renamed it to Palestine. And again, if you watch my videos on Titus and Hadrian and the Roman period of the Romans in Judea, I go into more detail on all this, and again, I'll leave those links here in the description as well, so you can more watch detail here. But there's no doubt, as a result of what the Romans did, we do see a dramatic population decline, right? As low as probably 100,000 Jewish people were probably left once the Romans were done. After the Roman period, we do see a recovery again a bit during the Byzantine period. And then, we get to a higher number again, maybe 300,000 or so. And then what? Then you have the Islamic period, right? And then when the Islamic period comes in, we gradually, between the 600s AD in the 1800s AD, see a gradual decline again of the Jewish population there. And while, yes, it's true that when the Muslim forces came into what is modern-day Israel, they did allow Jewish people, for the most part, to practice their faith, we also know that they treated them, in many ways like second-class citizens. For example, they had to pay an extra tax, something called the jizya. This was true of Christians in the area as well. And there were times, depending on which Islamic power was in charge of the region, right? Because there were different dynasties and different powers, from the Umayyads to the Abbasids to the Ottomans and so forth, that there were, more persecutions. There were even forced conversions. Probably a good example of one of the more intolerant rulers was a man named Al-Hakim. He's sometimes nicknamed as the Mad Caliph. He destroyed synagogues, destroyed churches as well. And so definitely during the Islamic period, you have this span of time where the Jewish people still lived in that area. This is, again, the key point of this whole video, is there's been a continuous Jewish presence despite all the people coming in and trying to adjust who the Jewish people are, outlawing circumcision, whatever it is. During the Islamic period, folks, they literally built the Dome of the Rock, right on top of what was Solomon's temple, right? I have a whole video on Solomon's temple as well, which you could watch, and you can learn about that. But the Jewish people still survived in that area. So then we get past the Ottoman period, and of course we have the British Mandate. The British take control of the region after World War I, and while all that's happening, you have Zionism. I think one of my most important videos I have is what is Zionism. Not to brag too much, but I honestly believe everything I've seen on the internet, my video on what is Zionism might be the clearest, best explanation. There's other good ones as well, but I'm very proud of that video. And with Zionism, you have this idea of the Jewish people coming back in mass numbers to Israel. You have what we call the aliyahs, these movements, between the late 1800s and 1948, when finally in 1948 Israel gains its independence again. Its independence as a Jewish civilization. And of course, since 1948, the population has gone up in millions. So there it is. I can't make it any clearer. Were there other people living in the land over those thousands of years? Sure. But no one has had a continuous presence in that land like the Jewish people have had for thousands of years. And anyone who denies that is simply denying facts and reality. So I hope you found that interesting, important. Please share, leave comments. And, I hope many people watch this video. And check out many of my other videos on these topics as well. All right, everyone. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.